We'd like to welcome you to today's webinar celebrating Arbor Day 2020. My name is Elena Edwards, and I want to let you know that today's webinar is being recorded. We will make it available on our Arboretum webpage at a later date. Since 2005, FAU's MacArthur campus in Jupiter has hosted an annual Arbor Day event in the Robert J. Huckshorn Arboretum. Over the years, our events have welcomed not only FAU students, faculty, and staff, but also members of the local community. This year, in light of recent global events, we decided to move our Arbor Day event online and offer today's webinar. We have several great speakers who will be presenting today, and towards the end of the webinar, we will have plenty of time for a Q&A session when you can ask our panelists questions. You will direct those questions to the host and presenters. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Kara Perry, Assistant Vice President of Communications for FAU's Northern Campuses. Kara.
Thank you, Elena, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you virtually today. FAU's John D. MacArthur campus in Jupiter is where groundbreaking programs in research and education create unmatched opportunities for the best and brightest students. It's where FAU converges on site with two of the world's leading research organizations, the Max Planck Florida Institute for Neuroscience and Scripps Research Institute, to offer high school, undergraduate, and graduate students transformational experiences not found anywhere else in the world. FAU Jupiter is home to the nationally ranked Harriet L. Wilkes Honors College and two of FAU's primary research organizations, the Brain Institute and iHealth. Learners of all ages and abilities can find inspiration on this special campus, where the College of Education hosts its Academy for Community Inclusion and the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. The Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Jupiter is the largest membership organization of its kind in the country, located right on our campus, delivering personal enrichment courses for seasoned adult learners. We are gathered here today to celebrate yet another important asset of FAU's Jupiter campus, and that's the Robert J. Huckshorn Arboretum, which provides our local community with a unique opportunity to enjoy and connect with our natural environment and its beauty. The Arboretum also provides our students a serene and inspiring location for outdoor learning. For those of you who didn't know Dr. Huckshorn, he was a founding faculty member of FAU in 1964. He held many positions at FAU throughout his 38-year career. One of his proudest accomplishments was spearheading the university's northward expansion by establishing the John D. MacArthur campus at Jupiter, where he served as vice president until his retirement. Upon Dr. Huckshorn's retirement in 2002, university supporters honored him by establishing the Huckshorn Arboretum. Thank you for tuning in to today's celebration, and now Elena will begin the program.
Thank you, Kara. Since we broke ground on the Arboretum in 2004, it has continued to grow and flourish. For those of you who haven't been to the Arboretum, we invite you to go and explore it, keeping a safe distance, of course. One of Dr. Huckshorn's wishes was that the Arboretum could be a place on campus where students, faculty, and staff could escape and the local community could enjoy. And yes, that is former FAU football coach Howard Schnellenberger up there on the right, pointing out an Atala hair streak. With that vision in mind, the plantings in the Arboretum focus on native ecosystems and native plants. Now, 16 years after its first plantings in the Arboretum in the spring of 2005, the Arboretum has matured and has become the place that Dr. Huckshorn hoped it would become. Often, professors hold classes in the Arboretum, and it's a great spot to sit and relax at any time of year. We also host Dr. Bill O'Brien's Honors College students in the Arboretum for service learning projects, and their efforts help keep the Arboretum looking beautiful. But humans aren't the only ones enjoying the Arboretum. There are squirrels and marsh rabbits that make the Arboretum their home. Many species of butterflies, and so many species of birds. Even I had no idea how many until I started putting together this presentation. There are hawks and vireos, and woodpeckers, and so many different kinds of warblers. All of these nature photos were taken by a local resident who visits the Arboretum weekly. I'd like to thank Tuli Datena for allowing us to use her images, and I encourage you to follow her adventures in the Arboretum on Instagram. These incredible sightings in the Arboretum wouldn't be possible without our native trees. In 2010, FAU's Jupiter campus was designated as a Tree Campus USA, which is a program created by the Arbor Day Foundation. And our Tree Campus USA happens to be within a Tree City USA. With more about these terrific programs, I'd like to introduce you to our first panelist, Barrett Cruz, who is the Natural Resources Supervisor with the town of Jupiter. Barrett?
Good afternoon. My name is Barrett Cruz, and I'm the Natural Resources Supervisor for the town of Jupiter. I want to thank Elena and Florida Atlantic University for inviting us to celebrate Arbor Day with them, as we've done together several times in the past. And as she mentioned, today I've been asked to speak about the Tree City USA program and the town of Jupiter's participation in this program, along with the National Arbor Day Foundation. Next slide, please. Well, the Tree City USA program is a national recognition program sponsored by the National Arbor Day Foundation. It's a partnership between the foundation, the U.S. Forest Service, and the National Association of State Foresters. It was introduced in 1976 as a way for communities to be recognized for the special emphasis they place on their environment, and specifically for the emphasis they place on trees, and to recognize the contributions that those trees make to the environment and to public spaces. The program assists communities in the management of their public trees by providing educational materials and a framework for maintaining trees in the appropriate manner. Next slide, please. So what are the requirements for becoming a Tree City? How can a community do that? Well, all municipalities are eligible, and any municipality can qualify as long as they meet 4 simple requirements. They need to establish a tree board or a department. They need to write and adopt an ordinance that addresses tree care and tree protection. They need to establish some type of community forestry or tree maintenance program, and they need to have some type of official annual Arbor Day celebration, which I'll go into each of those in a little more detail over the next few slides. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit about how we've done this in Jupiter. First, establish a tree board or department. Well, years ago, the town created the Natural Resources Division within the Department of Planning and Zoning. This is the division where I happen to work, and we're involved in just about everything related to the natural environment within the town's boundaries. We review the landscaping and tree preservation plans for new developments. We participate in marine facility reviews, reviewing docks, seawall permits, those types of things. And we work with neighborhoods and landscapers to encourage the planting of new trees, and also to ensure that those trees are protected and are properly maintained. The town also has a historic resources board that's established to make recommendations to the town council if there are any notable trees of historic significance. And you can see on this slide is our locally Abbott Oak, which is located at Sausage Bay Park. Next slide, please. Well, second, adopt a tree care ordinance. Well, the town's first landscape code was adopted in 1977, and that was the first time that specifically commercial properties were required to plant trees on their property. And since that time, the code's been modified and updated so that now it specifically addresses planting and preservation of trees, as well as referencing proper pruning standards and specifically encouraging pruning of trees by certified arborists. Next slide, please. Well, the third point is to develop a forestry or a tree care program. In total, Jupiter's budget is over $3 million annually directed towards tree care and landscape maintenance. And we also work together with local arborists to care for several trees, specific trees of local significance. And finally, we provide education materials both on our website as well as in pamphlet form. And we conduct individual meetings with businesses and HOAs to discuss proper requirements for the town's landscape code, and also to provide instructions on proper pruning and tree care. Next slide, please. Well, the fourth and final requirement is to observe Arbor Day, which we are actually doing right now. The town of Jupiter observes Arbor Day on an annual basis, and that's when our mayor issues a proclamation recognizing the special day. We've got a copy of our last year's proclamation up there on the slide. Over the years, we've celebrated Arbor Day by hosting tree giveaways. We've planted trees in public spaces along with partners like the Jupiter High School Environmental Research and Field Studies Academy and their agricultural program as well. Next slide, please. Apart from these annual celebrations, we continue to emphasize planting new trees in public spaces. So we've had trees planted in memory of specific individuals, such as the former Natural Resources Supervisor, my friend Sean Nyman, and the contributions that they've made to the community. And you can see the picture in the top left was the ceremony where we planted a tree in his honor several years ago. In some instances, replacement trees have been planted as a result of rulings and code compliance cases. The picture on the right is a cypress wetland we've recreated. These trees were planted in Cinquez Park on Indiantown Road to replace trees that were removed without permits or were severely damaged by hat racking and other types of improper maintenance. Next slide, please. Results, that's what we all want to see in. And I truly believe that Jupiter is a better place because of our participation in this program. And these are some of the reasons that Jupiter has become a community that the residents that live here are very proud of, and a lot of people want to become residents of this town. Neighborhoods throughout town have tree-lined streets. They're walkable in the middle of summer. Property values are increased, and the increased shade reduces the consumption of energy and increases the production of oxygen. Next slide, please. As a result of these programs, we have passed the 20-year mark as a Tree City USA, which is, in my mind, quite an accomplishment. We celebrated our 23rd year in the program last year, and we are looking forward to finishing out our 24th year in a few more months. Participating in the program and help ensure that town priorities are front and center. We've got signs on several of our entries to the town, and we like to recognize these accomplishments. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak today, and want to say how happy we are again to be participating in this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Barrett. The town of Jupiter has really done an amazing job at making trees a priority. We really appreciate that. So I'd like to introduce you to our next panelist. Jeff Nerge is a native plant expert and the owner of Native Choice Plant Nursery in Boynton Beach. So take it away, Jeff.
Thank you, Alana. Thanks for the invite. I'm going to go over a number of trees, 5 or 6 of them, but on my website, nativechoicenursery.com, there is a YouTube video on the front page that you can click on to get a more extensive list of trees that you can use for your yard. Starting with that, next slide. The first tree is Gumbo Limbo, a very important canopy tree for our forests down here, what's left of our forests, but a great tree for residential areas, provides a lot of fruit for birds and shelter for wildlife. There's a number of these at the Arboretum. The birds, especially the migrating birds, come in for the fruits when they're blooming. Next slide. Dahoon holly. This tree actually is likes a little bit of wetter conditions. It can survive in short periods of drought, but likes to be situated in an area where it gets wet occasionally. Does provide fruit for birds, especially our migrating birds, and also provides shelter. Next slide, please. The wild tamarin. This is one of my favorites. If you are familiar with the Royal Ponciana, which is a tree from Brazil, gets the big red flowers on it. This is a very similar looking tree, although the leaves are much smaller and the seed pods are much smaller also. It gets, if you look at the picture on the left, it does get these small white pom-pom type flowers on it, which are very attractive to our European honeybees. And also it is the host plant for two of our native butterflies, the cassia blue and the large orange sulfur. It provides a lot of canopy for areas to create a shade garden in. In the wintertime, it loses about a third of its leaves, which lets the sunlight in the wintertime, which enables the plants underneath it to survive and thrive. This is one of my favorite trees that I like using for landscapes. You can fit these into all types of areas around the house. I've seen these down in the Florida Keys practically planted right next to a house. They just prune it up to its canopy over the top of the roof, and a wonderful, wonderful tree. Next slide, please. Buttonwood trees. There are two varieties of buttonwood trees. Both of them are coastal. The green buttonwood tree, which you see in the bottom left corner there, makes a great canopy tree for great canopy tree for birds. Also provides fruit for the birds that are migrating. And the one on the right is the silver buttonwood, which is also a coastal tree. This one has been, I feel, overutilized inland because it doesn't really like to be in a lot of different residential yards inland, as it really relies on the salt spray and intense heat that comes off the coastline. So if you've got a house closer to the coast, this is more appropriate. And I feel that the green buttonwoods can do much better job inland than the silver buttonwoods. Next slide, please. The southern slash pine. Unfortunately, a lot of these pines are being taken down throughout the county, which is a shame because this tree, of all the trees, is what our woodpeckers rely on to build their nest cavities in. So we've been replanting these extensively by the thousands, replanting them all through the county. There's a lot of concern about how they come down in hurricanes, but if you ever get a visit to the Mounts Botanical Gardens here in West Palm Beach, they have a number of old specimens, southern slash pines on the grounds, and they survived through Wilma and Irma and a few of the other hurricanes, and not a single one of them came down. You'll lose a few branches, but they are very, very sturdy trees. So we've been replanting these to try to bring the woodpeckers back into certain areas around the county. A wonderful tree. It's not one that you want to plant near a pool, obviously, because of the pine needles. But again, we've been replanting these for the woodpeckers, and it does provide shelter for other birds also. Next slide, please. The live oak and then also the laurel oak. Both of these oak trees provide a lot of shelter. As a matter of fact, they're the #1 habitat for over 200 species of birds, wildlife, insects, butterflies. As far as providing a habitat, it's the #1 tree here in South Florida. Again, unfortunately, a lot of times they're planted in the wrong spot. They do have a pretty invasive root structure, at least the live oak does. So you got to be careful where you situate them on your property, but every property should have at least one live oak tree on it. Now, the live oaks down here don't get quite as large as they do up north, although they do get big, but they don't get as big as they are up north. The laurel oak on the right is more of a water species. If you've got low areas in your yard, this will thrive. It's a wonderful tree, and as you can tell, it's more of a lime green leaf color. It does shed its leaves just like the live oak does, and it's more upright. It's not a very broad tree. Does quite well in storms, contrary to what you've probably read in some other publications, but I haven't had much difficulty with this particular oak tree. So I highly recommend both of them. The live oak, more of a high and dry, and the laurel oak, more of a lower, wetter area. Next slide, please. Mahogany. The mahogany tree is actually a coastal tree, and it's from Dade County, basically. They've been planted almost everywhere through the Tri-County area, which is kind of a shame because they they require a lot of maintenance to keep them pruned properly. You really need an arborist to manage these trees. I see so many of them that are just not pruned properly because they don't like to maintain a central leader, as you can tell from the pictures. So they have to be pruned properly to withstand hurricane force winds. Having said that, they are appropriate for coastal areas. I have seen them inland. And you have to be careful where you situate them also because they produce these large nuts, as you can see at the top right corner there, that are not appropriate if you're planting the tree next to a driveway or a sidewalk because they will drop the nuts on cars and put nice little dings in them. It's a very, very drought tolerant tree, which is probably why a lot of people have been using them, but I feel it's being overused. But having said that, it is a wonderful tree and does provide a lot of shelter for birds. And I believe that's it, Alana. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I'm going to pass it on to our next panelist, Steve Becchio, who is an arborist and the owner of Only Trees in Jupiter. Steve is going to share a few of his favorite tips for preparing your trees for hurricane season.
Thank you, Alana, and happy Arbor Day to everybody. First slide, please. Next slide, please. Let's start with the obvious, removing coconuts from coconut palms. One of the reasons we do this is because the nuts can detach, and detached coconuts can cause property damage. Next slide. The removal of dead trees. Dead trees can become brittle, break apart easily in a wind event, and cause property damage. Next slide. And the not so obvious, look around your yard for tree defects like signs of decay and disease. Signs of defects, photo on the left, if you'll notice, the infestation of termites. On the right, permaconcrete growth, possible decay. If you have any questions about a possible tree defect or a hazard, you should consult a certified arborist. Next slide. Look for potential tree hazards. Examples could be tree branches touching buildings or homes, coconut palms with nuts over rooftops, branches leaning on rooftops. Tree hazards can lead to property damage. Again, if you have any questions, notify a certified arborist. Next slide. Let's discuss getting your hardwood trees ready for storm season. It's essential. Trim trees for strength and structure. On the slide, you notice some oak before and after picture. And we prune hardwood trees for structure and strength, develop or maintain a dominant leader. On the right, you'll notice we identify the lowest branch in the permanent canopy. We prevent branches from the permanent canopy from growing upright or too large. Those would be referred to as co-dominant leads, and we'll talk about that in a couple slides. Space main branches along a dominant trunk, which is known as scaffolding, and usually that's about 18 inches in between laterals. Keep all branches less than 1/2 of the trunk diameter, and suppress growth on branches with bark inclusions or decay. Next slide. Now let's talk about pruning mature hardwoods, trees in preparation for storm season. This is a Bucidia or a shady lady. We reduce the weight at the end of the leaves to help prevent lead failure. The canopy to allow wind to pass through, minimizing damage. Minimizing hazardous conditions by reducing foliage mass, especially toward the ends, the largest and the longest branches, and those with defects. Next slide. Why proper tree structure is important. Notice on all of these three sides, the trees failed. They all have co-dominant leaves, which I mentioned in the last two slides. And when you have the co-dominant leaves, they're prone, normally do fail. That's why pruning of the young trees is so important. Next slide, please. Why is improper pruning bad? Quoted to the left, the tree canopy was reduced or shaped using heading cuts. It's an improper way to reduce the tree. The tree will immediately try to replenish the lost canopy. The new growth will be rapid, abundant, and the new tissue will be weak and poorly attached. To the right, we can assume the homeowner wanted the branches removed that were growing over his home. In both instances, this is known as topping, is not tolerable for a tree. Next slide, please. Now we'll speak about palms. Don't over trim your palms. Removing too many fronds depletes the tree's food source. The palm fronds act as a protectant to the bud of the palm. Over pruning palms is stressful to the palm and makes it more likely to die. Evidence of years of over pruning can be found in the photo on the right. Palm tree trunk shows signs of penciling. You can see on the right also many rows of fronds were taken off. I'm sure they were healthy fronds, which is not very good at all for a palm tree. Next slide. The lessons learned from past hurricanes. This is a carrot wood from 2004. Some of the lessons learned: Florida native trees do much better in a windstorm event than non-native trees. Older trees are more likely to fail in hurricanes. Unhealthy trees are predisposed to damage. Trees with poor structure or included bark are more vulnerable in the wind. And last but not least, well-pruned trees survive hurricanes better than poorly pruned or unpruned trees. Next slide. Should you have any questions about proper tree pruning, it's always best to consult with a certified arborist. Here are a couple of websites to help you find one in your area. I want to thank everyone for listening. Have a happy Arbor Day. And that's my presentation.
Thanks so much, Steve, for all those great tips, amazing advice. Now I'd like to pass it over to our last panelist, and then we'll have time for Q&A with all of our panelists. So our next panelist is Daniel Turbot. He is the Senior Vegetation Specialist with Florida Power and Light. And Daniel's going to talk with us a little bit about how to plant your trees with power lines in mind. Daniel.
Thank you, Elena. And thank you for allowing me to speak with all of you today. I'd like to take a few minutes just to go over our vegetation management program here at FPL and talk about what we do as a company when it comes to maintenance and trimming, and then also how the customers share in that responsibility to keep the lines clear. It really is a team effort. Next slide. So our power delivery team helps ensure reliable service by keeping trees and vegetation away from the power lines. With that, we reduce and trim trees or other vegetation which have the potential to cause outages or momentary interruptions. We also educate customers on proper vegetation maintenance and power line safety. We also collaborate with local leaders and municipalities to promote FPL's Right Tree, Right Place program. Next slide. So what exactly are we doing when it comes to tree trimming and maintenance to keep the power lines clear? We trim trees on a consistent planned trimming and clearing cycle. The majority of our scheduled line clearing occurs before the height of the storm season. This includes lines that serve central infrastructure facilities like hospitals and police stations. We trim our main lines on a 3-year average cycle, our neighborhood lines on a 6-year average cycle, and we perform cycle or what we call hotspot trimming as needed to address any of those fast-growing vegetation conditions. Overall, FPL trims about 15,000 miles of vegetation each year, so it's a pretty big feat each year. Next slide, please. So what can customers do to help keep trees away from power lines? And it starts with following FPL's Right to Right Place guidelines. As you can see in the image, this is the most updated setback guidelines recommended by Florida Power and Light. Setbacks for hardwoods are based on canopy height and width. So larger trees like oaks and ficus need at least 50 feet setback from the closest conductor. Medium trees, which are like crepe myrtle or satin leaf, can be about 30 feet setback from the closest conductor. And then on the right side of the image, you see the palm tree, which is one of Florida's biggest landscape feature. Setback for these palms have to be the palm frond plus 20 feet. So the setback for palms are based on mature height, frond length, and frond throw potential. Potential is when those palms that self-prune, palms, Washingtonian palms, in a windy day or even a hurricane situation, the palm fronds will detach and can get tangled into power lines. So that extra distance away from the conductors prevents even outages in stormy conditions. Next slide. These are some examples of wrong tree, wrong place in your power lines. So the first one is large royal palms planted almost directly under distribution and transmission lines. These palms are going to have to be trimmed on a very frequent basis, which is not overall good for their health, but it must be done for the power line reliability and safety. The middle mango tree planted directly under a distribution line, and you have the classic V cut, the utility cut that attempts to directionally direct the branches away from the power lines. However, with these aggressive growth trees, they will grow back. And then finally, on the right is bamboo, one of the fastest growing species in the world. Beautiful landscape plant, but when planted too close to power lines, becomes a big issue. Next slide. Underground power systems generally perform well, but are not indestructible. So even when you have these underground neighborhoods with no power lines, you'll see these green boxes, the pad mount transformers, which you can see on that right-hand side of the picture. Landscaping for these should be set back and maintained by at least 3 feet on the sides and in the back, and 8 feet in the front. And this allows for safe and easy access for line crews during repairs or even power restoration. Next slide. So property owners are responsible for safely maintaining trees and vegetation on their property away from power lines. And what that means is customers are before it gets too close to the power lines. In this picture, you're seeing here is almost a perfect scenario where the hardwood trees have been set back from both transmission and neighborhood lines far enough where they're not going to come in contact with the lines or fall into the lines. Same with the larger palms. But this is a good example of a right tree, right place. Next slide. So what else can customers do? It's important to know that if you have vegetation near power lines or on your property that need clearing or trimming, you always hire a qualified professional. Please don't take it upon yourself to perform any work near power lines. At the same time, we encourage customers to routinely perform yard work on the property that isn't near power lines. Don't wait for a hurricane or other major events to do that. But always remember, power lines are dangerous. Keep yourself and the end of any object you're holding at least 10 feet away from neighborhood power lines and 30 feet away from transmission lines. We can't stress that enough. We want you guys to be safe when working, trimming near power lines. And also, if you're doing any digging, please call 811 before you dig. It is the law. Next slide. So everyone plays a role when keeping power lines clear, but it starts with planting the right tree in the right place. I encourage you to go to our website, fpl.com/trees. We also have a power line display with the right tree, right place signage at the FAU Arboretum. Looks great out there. And thank you again for FAU for having us there. And thank you for having FPL for this Arbor Day webinar today.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And I was just going to mention our Right Tree, Right Place demonstration project in the Arboretum, so I'm glad you mentioned it. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for taking time out of their schedules to be here. We do have some time now for questions. So if you're here with us on WebEx, you're going to use the chat function, and I think most of you found it, to tell me that I was muted. So you can just go into the chat function and select I think it's to all panelists, and then type your question. And if you have one for a specific person, you can put their name in there. And if you're on Facebook, just add your questions in the comments section. And so we do have our first question here from Alicia, and it is for Barrett. So Barrett, she is asking, is the Tree Campus USA initiated through the city or through a university? What is the relationship of the town of Jupiter with FAU Jupiter Campus? And I guess either you or I could answer this. Would you like to take a stab at it, or would you like me to?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so the Tree City, Tree Campus USA, the programs are a little bit different. Jupiter is part of the Tree City USA program, and that's initiated by us. We fill out an application every year and provide documentation that we've fulfilled all of those 4 requirements. And then we submit that, it's evaluated, and once approved, we get our certification for the year, along with a plaque and some other, I guess, memorial type information for us. And then as far as the relationship with the town of Jupiter and the FAU campus, there's not really a formal relationship that I'm aware of. It's just that the campus is actually located within the boundaries of the town, so within city limits, so to speak. And because of that, we've got a good working relationship because we do have a lot of different things in common. Anything you want to add, Elena?
Yeah, so, you know, both of those programs are through the Arbor Day Foundation. And so Jupiter was a Tree City USA long before we were a Tree Campus USA. And the gentleman that Barrett mentioned, Sean Neiman, who was with the town of Jupiter, he guided me through the process of getting the Tree Campus USA, you know, all of the requirements that we had to do. One of the things that we had to do for that was a tree inventory on campus. So one of my interns did, as her honors thesis, an inventory of trees on the entire Jupiter campus. If anyone's interested, that's on our website. You can go in and look at her results that she came up with. So. Okay, our next question. This one is also from Alicia. She is an educator, so she's wondering if Jeff, if you have some kind of information that would be a good resource for teachers, or should we just send them to your website?
Yeah, I would just send them to my website, and then we can go from there. Probably worth just a conversation.
Okay.
Reach out to me, yeah, through there. Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, as far as native books on trees, that's why I got into the business years ago, is because you can read as much as you want in books, but I've got a number of them. I've got dozens of them on native plants, native trees, all that sort of thing. But unfortunately, it doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of specifics as far as sun, shade, soil conditions, things like that. And a lot of mistakes are made putting trees in the wrong place. You know, they'll say that they're native to, you know, South Florida, but, you know, they might not be appropriate for a coastal situation or for inland or vice versa. So if they want to have a discussion about that, I'm more than willing to talk to them.
Great. Okay, this question could be maybe to Steve. Since you're the one going out to people's properties and dealing with the trees, what kinds of trees should homeowners avoid?
Well, I tell you, first off, obviously, we want to get a Florida native. We have a lot of great trees in the Jupiter Farms area, and pretty much up here on Center Street. But we always go with really the right tree, right place. In my house, I have a lot of different trees, and the things that I'm trying to think of is, well, as far as scale, how's it going to look in your yard? Do I want an ornamental? Do I want something flowery? Am I looking for pop? Am I something of substance? How big will it get? I personally don't have power lines overhead. They're big, so I don't have to worry about, but I do know about the green box. Leaf drop, that's an issue. If you have a pool, do you want a tababuya right next to your pool? I think not. So those are some of the things you think about. And honestly, the thing that I've looked a lot about is going to our local nurseries and asking questions. And even certified arborists, there's a lot of things that I've learned in the 22 years I've been doing this, is just by asking questions and reading. But those are some things that'll help guide you.
All right, thanks so much, Steve. All right, we have a question from Teresa, and this is probably for Jeff, and you're gonna have to unmute yourself, Jeff. Wild tamarind is not the same as the Asian tamarind that provides edible fruit, is it?
No, no.
Yep.
It's a different tamarind. It's not edible.
So yeah, so it's not edible except for butterflies, as you mentioned. The cassius and the larger sulfur use it. So.
Yeah.
So this next question, also from Teresa, is for Daniel. Is FPL allowed to cut property trees if they're in the way?
So we'll for any kind of power restoration situation, we do have the right to trim a tree or cut a tree back to restore power safely. But as far as our normal trimming cycle, we have the right to trim trees to maintain the power lines. We don't remove any trees without property owner approval. And removal of trees would mostly include trees that are not able to be trimmed anymore or are not safe to be trimmed anymore, such as like a palm tree that's too close or a bamboo that's going to be constantly growing back in this line. But we still have to go through the property owner to secure a removal authorization.
Interesting. Okay, so I have another question from Terry, and she's asking, is it important to mulch trees regularly? So who would like to take that one on?
I'd like to comment on that. The mulching part, I think, is an important part of the health of the tree. The one mistake that I would say 75–85% of the people make is they take the mulch and they butt it up against the actual main stem or the trunk of the tree. The reason we don't want to do that is we don't want wood on wood, because the mulch is there to collect water for moisture for the tree. And so if it's up against the wood, you start to have rotting and decay. Lawn mowing equipment, it helps keep that away from the trunk of the tree. As we use mulch instead of having grass right up against the tree. So mulch is an excellent idea for a tree. Just don't mound it up on the trunk of the tree. Keep it away from the tree. 2–3 inches is good.
And Jeff, I know you wanted to comment too.
He said exactly what I was going to say.
I'll throw one thing in, one comment. This is Barrett again.
Great, go ahead, Barrett.
Okay, it's not always possible, depending on the type of landscape area. In a more manicured landscape area, more finely ground mulch like the melaleuca, eucalyptus, or the cypress blend mulch is what's typically used. But if you've got an area where it's not as important aesthetically, it's really a good idea to use a more natural type of mulch, such as ground up leaves and twigs and sticks and stems and that type of thing that you get from removing a tree, and mulch the area with that, because that type of mulch degrades better and it provides a better habitat for the types of insects and bacteria that add to the degradation process, and it ends up enhancing the soil and adding more organic matter to the soil.
That's a great tip, Barrett. Thank you. Teresa had another question about what happens if there are nests or young wildlife in a tree that's about to be trimmed or cut down. And I'll ask that one for Steve, but Steve, make sure you're close to the mic because we're getting some feedback a little bit on your mic.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, so this happens occasionally, not very often, but like I said, over 20 some odd years, there are times when we'll be contracted to trim a tree and perhaps the homeowner doesn't know about it and there is a nest. So honestly, the thing that we do is we just say, hey, listen, we can't do it. Let's let the nesting process, go through. As far as the birds, whether they be eggs or whether they be hatchlings, and we just ask them to give us a call back. They think it's clear, and once it's clear, then we come and trim the tree. Especially with the protected birds, we're real cautious. I've learned a lot about birds over the years. That's one of the nice things I love about working in this business is I've learned a lot about nature. I wasn't as knowledgeable before I started in arboriculture.
You'll have to come visit the Arboretum too.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay, I have another one for Jeff, and I'm not sure I understand the question, but maybe you will, Jeff. It's from Anne, and she's asking, is there a market for information on trees in a book publication for home landscapes? She's thinking of writing a book.
Your audio is breaking up. Can you repeat that?
Is there a market for information on trees in a book or publication for home landscape?
Yes.
There's a market, Anne.
Yes,
you
there
need
is.
more clarification on that, and maybe send me a.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number, especially native trees. There's some publications, but they're so dated now. There needs to be something at least, more up to date. Because some of the old books that have native trees in it or talk about native trees aren't native at all, which is really interesting. So some of the old books actually tout trees that aren't even native to South Florida. So yeah, there's a market for a good tree book, native tree book. Yes.
So there you go. That's what you can do during quarantine, Jeff. Maybe you guys can all get together and write the book.
Sure.
Oh, she says maybe we can write a good book. Anne's ready to partner with you there on that.
There you go.
Okay, this is another one probably for Jeff, and this is probably from Kristen, even though it's not saying it. Can mahogany leaves be used for mulch? She has a lot of them.
Yes. Yes, they can.
And so just basically sweep them up and mulch them in your own property.
Just sweep them up and just put them up next to the tree or bushes or whatever you want, wherever you want to mulch it. This worked perfect.
Great. Okay. This question, I'm not sure who would answer this, so I'll let you guys discuss who would be the best one to answer. What kinds of citrus trees do well in our area? Maybe that would be a Steve question. Jeff, do you know?
Well, I can tell you that the most success I've had are with two small varieties. They do well inland and they do well on the coast, also in containers as well as in the ground. One is Calamundan and the other one is Kumquat. Those two varieties of fruit trees don't seem to need the treatments from pesticides like copper fungicide to keep the critters off of them, like oranges and grapefruit and limes. I've had a lot more success with those varieties. Now, that's not a big fruit, obviously, but it can be used, in drinks. You can squeeze it in drinks and stuff like that. But I found good success with those two varieties, Calamundan and Kumquat.
Great.
This is Barrett. I can jump in on this a little bit too.
Go for it.
Okay, if you're interested and if you have something to write with, down at the Mounts Botanical Garden, there's the University of Florida Extension Service, and you can call the extension agent and they can give you quite a bit of information that would probably be a good answer to that question, in addition to what Jeff was saying. And the number there is 561-233-1700. The extension agents are very, very helpful with a range of different issues with planting, landscaping, agriculture, etc.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Barrett. Let's see. I think unless anyone has any more questions, I'll put in this last one again from Alicia, who is curious if any of the panelists would be willing to do a virtual presentation with a class of students as a guest speaker. Now that you guys are pros at the virtual presentations.
Yeah, we are Only Trees. We actually do this for more HOA boards, and but yeah, we're always not only am I a certified arborist at Only Trees, but we have 3 others. So yeah, we love to talk about trees. So if anyone would ever like to have us, we're more than willing to come by and chat.
Great. Okay, our last call for any questions. All righty then. Well, I'd just like to thank all of our speakers for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us today. And I would like to thank all of the attendees for attending today. And I hope that you'll take a few minutes to fill out the brief survey that you'll be directed to. And then also check out our Arboretum webpage. And we do hope that you will consider supporting the Arboretum. And I'll put a link to our support page here in the comments. And I just want to say to everybody, have a happy Arbor Day and please stay safe. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lena.